Sarah Martinez stood barely 5 feet 2 inches tall, weighing no more than 115 pounds soaking wet. At 18 years old, she looked more like a high school cheerleader than someone who would one day become one of the most feared snipers in modern military history. Growing up in a small farming town in Montana, Sarah spent her childhood helping her father hunt deer and elk to feed their family of 7 children. Her father, Miguel Martinez, was a former Marine who had served 2 tours in Vietnam. He noticed something special about his youngest daughter from an early age. While her brothers and sisters would get bored after an hour of target practice, Sarah could spend entire days perfecting her aim. She had an unusual ability to remain perfectly still for hours, watching and waiting for the perfect shot. The other kids at school often made fun of Sarah's small size. During PE class, she was always picked last for basketball and volleyball teams. Her classmates would joke that a strong wind might blow her away. But what they didn't know was that Sarah's small frame actually gave her advantages that larger people didn't have. She could hide in places others couldn't fit, move silently through tight spaces, and her steady hands never trembled, even in freezing Montana winters. When Sarah turned 16, her father took her to the annual county shooting competition. Men twice her age and size lined up to compete. Many of them experienced hunters and former military personnel. Sarah felt nervous as she looked around at the intimidating competition. Her hands were sweating, and for a moment she considered backing out. The first round involved shooting targets at 200 yards with standard hunting rifles. Sarah watched as participant after participant took their shots, some hitting close to the center, others missing entirely. When her turn came, whispers spread through the crowd. Some people chuckled, wondering what this tiny girl was doing among serious marksmen. Sarah took her position, controlled her breathing just like her father had taught her, and squeezed the trigger. The bullet hit dead center. The crowd fell silent. She fired 4 more shots, each one landing within a quarter inch of the bullseye. By the end of the competition, Sarah had not only won first place, but had set a new county record that stood for the next 8 years. Word of the small girl's incredible shooting ability spread quickly through their rural community. Local newspaper reporters came to interview her, and shooting enthusiasts from neighboring states began inviting her to competitions. Sarah's confidence grew with each victory, but she remained humble and focused on constantly improving her skills. During her senior year of high school, military recruiters began visiting Sarah's school. When they spoke to her class about career opportunities, Sarah felt a calling she had never experienced before. The idea of serving her country and using her unique talents to protect others resonated deeply with her. However, when she approached the Army recruiter after the presentation, his reaction was not what she had hoped for. Staff Sergeant Johnson looked Sarah up and down with obvious skepticism. At barely 18 and looking even younger, she didn't fit his mental image of a soldier. He explained that military life was extremely demanding physically and mentally. He suggested that perhaps she might consider other branches of service or support roles that would be more suitable for someone of her stature. Sarah felt disappointed, but not defeated. She had faced doubt and skepticism her entire life because of her size. Instead of giving up, she began researching military requirements and training programs. She spent hours at the local library, reading about different military occupational specialties and the physical standards required for each. That summer, Sarah began an intensive physical training program. Every morning at 5 a.m., she would run 5 miles through the mountain trails near her home. She lifted weights, practiced combat movements, and continued her marksmanship training. Her father, seeing his daughter's determination, helped her create a training schedule that would prepare her for the challenges ahead. When Sarah returned to speak with the recruiter at the beginning of her senior year, Staff Sergeant Johnson was amazed by her physical transformation. She had gained muscle mass while maintaining her small frame, and her endurance had improved dramatically. More importantly, her confidence and determination were unmistakable. Sarah scored exceptionally high on the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, particularly in the areas of general science, arithmetic reasoning, and mechanical comprehension. Her test scores, combined with her documented marksmanship abilities, caught the attention of special operations recruiters who were always looking for individuals with unique skill sets. During her final months of high school, Sarah received a visit from a different kind of recruiter. Captain Williams was a special operations liaison who had heard about the small-town girl with extraordinary shooting abilities. He explained that the military was evolving, and beginning to recognize that effectiveness in combat wasn't always about size and brute strength. Captain Williams told Sarah about opportunities in specialized units where precision, patience, and mental toughness were more valuable than physical size. He mentioned sniper training programs and reconnaissance units that needed individuals who could remain undetected in challenging environments. For the first time since beginning her military journey, Sarah felt like someone in uniform truly understood her potential. The conversation with Captain Williams changed everything for Sarah. She began to see her small stature not as a limitation, but as a strategic advantage. She realized that in modern warfare, being able to hide in small spaces, move undetected, and remain motionless for extended periods were incredibly valuable skills. As graduation approached, Sarah's classmates were making typical plans for college or local jobs. Sarah had different plans entirely. She had signed her enlistment contract and would be leaving for basic training just 2 weeks after graduation. Some of her classmates still doubted whether she could handle military life. But Sarah's family and close friends knew better. Her father, Miguel, pulled her aside the night before she left for basic training. With tears in his eyes, he told her how proud he was of her determination and courage. He reminded her that being underestimated could be one of her greatest advantages, as long as she never underestimated herself. As Sarah packed her bags for the journey that would change her life forever, she thought about all the people who had doubted her because of her size. She was determined to prove that heart, skill, and determination mattered more than height and weight. Little did she know that within just a few years, she would become a legend whose actions would save countless lives and earn the respect of the most elite warriors in the world. Fort Benning, Georgia felt like stepping into a different world for Sarah Martinez. The humidity hit her like a wall as she stepped off the bus with dozens of other new recruits. Drill sergeants immediately began shouting commands, and Sarah found herself swept into the chaos of initial processing. Standing in formation with her fellow recruits, she realized she was not only the smallest person present but also one of only 3 women in the entire group. Drill Sergeant Thompson's eyes landed on Sarah during the first inspection. His expression showed clear doubt as he looked down at the tiny recruit who barely reached his shoulder. Without saying a word directly to her, he announced to the entire formation that basic training would separate the weak from the strong, and that some people simply weren't cut out for military service. The first few weeks of basic training tested every aspect of Sarah's preparation. The physical training was intense with daily runs, obstacle courses, and strength exercises designed to push recruits to their limits. Many of the male recruits struggled with the demands, but Sarah surprised everyone by consistently finishing in the top third of her group during physical fitness tests. Where Sarah truly excelled was during weapons training. When the recruits were introduced to the M4 carbine, Sarah's years of hunting experience immediately showed. While other recruits struggled with basic marksmanship principles like breathing control and sight alignment, Sarah was hitting targets that seasoned drill sergeants found challenging. Staff Sergeant Davis, the weapons instructor, noticed Sarah's exceptional abilities during the first day on the firing range. While most recruits were happy to qualify at the minimum level, Sarah was consistently scoring expert-level marks. Her shots were so precise that other recruits began gathering around her target to see the tight grouping she was achieving. However, Sarah's small size continued to create challenges in unexpected ways. During combat training exercises, some of the male recruits assumed she would be a weak link in team operations. They would try to take over her assignments or suggest she stay behind during more challenging scenarios. Sarah had to prove herself repeatedly, not just to the drill sergeants but to her fellow recruits who couldn't see past her physical appearance. The turning point came during a particularly difficult field exercise in week 6 of basic training. The platoon was divided into teams for a combat simulation that involved navigating rough terrain, establishing defensive positions, and engaging simulated enemy forces. Sarah's team leader, a large recruit from Texas named Johnson, immediately assigned her to a support role carrying communications equipment rather than a primary combat position. During the exercise, Sarah's team found themselves pinned down by opposing forces positioned on high ground, approximately 300 yards away. The standard M4 carbines they were using weren't effective at that distance, and the team was unable to advance. Johnson and the other team members were frustrated and couldn't figure out how to complete their mission. Sarah studied the tactical situation and realized she could reach a flanking position that would give her a clear shot at the opposing force's position. Despite Johnson's initial objections, she convinced him to let her attempt the maneuver. Using her small size to her advantage, Sarah crawled through brush and rocks that larger soldiers couldn't navigate, reaching a concealed position with a perfect line of sight. From her hidden location, Sarah began systematically eliminating the opposing force members with precision shots that amazed the observing instructors. Her ability to remain undetected while delivering accurate fire from an unexpected angle completely changed the dynamics of the exercise. Within minutes, her team was able to advance and complete their objective successfully. Drill Sergeant Thompson, who had been observing the exercise, called Sarah aside afterward. For the first time since arriving at basic training, he spoke to her with genuine respect. He acknowledged that she had demonstrated tactical thinking and marksmanship skills that exceeded his expectations. More importantly, he began recommending her for advanced training opportunities. As basic training progressed, Sarah's reputation among both instructors and fellow recruits began to change. Her consistent performance in all areas, combined with her exceptional shooting abilities, earned her recognition as one of the top soldiers in her training company. The same recruits who had initially doubted her capabilities were now seeking her advice and wanting her on their teams during exercises. During the final weeks of basic training, military occupational specialty counselors began meeting with recruits to discuss their career paths. When Sarah met with her counselor, she was surprised to learn that several different units had submitted requests to recruit her based on reports from her training instructors. The infantry requested her based on her exceptional marksmanship and tactical awareness during combat exercises. Military intelligence was interested in her high test scores and ability to remain undetected during reconnaissance training. However, the most intriguing opportunity came from a special operations liaison who had reviewed her training records and wanted to discuss sniper school. Captain Rodriguez explained that sniper training was one of the most demanding programs in the military, with an extremely high failure rate. The physical and mental challenges were designed to eliminate all but the most capable candidates. However, Sarah's combination of exceptional marksmanship, small stature for concealment, and demonstrated mental toughness made her an ideal candidate for the program. The opportunity to attend sniper school represented everything Sarah had dreamed of since enlisting. It would allow her to use her natural talents in service of her country, while proving that size and gender were irrelevant when it came to military effectiveness. However, Captain Rodriguez warned her that she would face skepticism and doubt from instructors and fellow students who had never seen a female sniper candidate. Sarah's graduation from basic training was a moment of tremendous pride for her family, who had traveled from Montana to attend the ceremony. Her father, Miguel, beamed with pride as he watched his daughter receive recognition as one of the top graduates in her training company. The drill sergeants who had initially doubted her capabilities now spoke of her as an example of what determination and skill could accomplish. However, Sarah knew that basic training was just the beginning of her journey. Sniper school would present challenges that would make basic training look easy in comparison. The failure rate exceeded 60%, and she would be entering a program where she might be the only woman among dozens of male candidates. As she prepared to leave Fort Benning for her next assignment, Sarah reflected on how much she had grown during the previous 3 months. She had proven to herself and others that her small stature was not a limitation, but rather a unique advantage in the right circumstances. The girl who had been told she was too small for military service was now being recruited by some of the most elite units in the Army. The bus ride to her next duty station gave Sarah time to think about the challenges ahead. She knew that sniper school would test her in ways she couldn't yet imagine, but she also knew that every person who had doubted her had only made her more determined to succeed. As the landscape of Georgia rolled by outside the window, Sarah Martinez prepared herself mentally for the next phase of her transformation, from small-town hunter to military sniper. Fort Moore, Georgia housed one of the most challenging military training programs in the world. The U.S. Army Sniper School had earned its reputation for breaking down even the strongest candidates and rebuilding only those who possessed the rare combination of physical endurance, mental toughness, and exceptional marksmanship skills. Sarah Martinez arrived at the base knowing she was about to face the greatest challenge of her military career. The first day of sniper school began at 4:30 a.m. with a formation that included 32 candidates from various military units. Sarah immediately noticed she was the only woman in the group, surrounded by men who looked like they had stepped out of military recruitment posters. Some were Special Forces operators, others were infantry soldiers with combat experience, and several were Marine Corps scout snipers seeking advanced training. Master Sergeant Williams, the chief instructor, walked down the line of candidates with an expression that suggested he had already decided most of them would fail. When he stopped in front of Sarah, his skeptical look was impossible to miss. Without addressing her directly, he announced to the entire group that sniper school was not a place for social experiments or political correctness. Only those who could meet the absolute highest standards would graduate. The physical demands of sniper school immediately separated the program from basic training. Candidates were required to carry 60-pound packs during 15-mile forced marches through difficult terrain. They had to complete obstacle courses while wearing full combat gear and maintain peak physical performance even when operating on minimal sleep and food. Sarah's small frame actually worked against her during some of the physical challenges. Carrying the standard equipment load meant she was bearing nearly half her body weight in gear, a much higher percentage than her larger classmates. During the first week, several candidates approached her privately, suggesting she should consider dropping out before the program became even more demanding. However, what Sarah lacked in raw physical strength, she made up for with endurance and determination. While larger candidates struggled with the cardio demands of long marches and began falling behind, Sarah maintained a steady pace throughout even the most challenging exercises. Her years of training in the Montana mountains had prepared her for exactly these kinds of demands. The marksmanship portion of sniper school revealed Sarah's true talents. Candidates were required to achieve expert-level accuracy at distances up to 1,000 yards under various weather conditions and time pressures. They had to learn to calculate wind speed, humidity effects, and bullet trajectory using mathematical formulas that challenged even the most educated soldiers. During the first precision shooting exercise, candidates fired from the 300-yard line at targets that required groupings smaller than 2 inches to pass. Sarah watched as several experienced soldiers struggled to meet the standard. Their shots scattered across target faces that looked barely visible at that distance. When her turn came, she felt the familiar calm that had served her well since childhood. Sarah's first group measured less than 1 inch across all 5 shots, earning surprised looks from both instructors and fellow candidates. As the distances increased to 500 and then 800 yards, her accuracy remained consistently superior to almost everyone else in the program. By the end of the first week of marksmanship training, she had achieved the highest scores recorded in the class. Master Sergeant Williams pulled Sarah aside after a particularly impressive shooting demonstration. His initial skepticism had begun to fade as he watched her consistently outperform candidates with years more experience. He acknowledged her exceptional marksmanship abilities but warned her that shooting accuracy was only one component of being an effective sniper. The fieldcraft portion of sniper school challenged candidates to master the arts of concealment, observation, and stalking. Students had to learn how to remain hidden for hours or even days while maintaining surveillance on targets. They practiced building camouflage positions that could fool trained observers searching for them, just yards away. Sarah's small stature became a significant advantage during stalking exercises. While larger candidates struggled to move undetected through open terrain, Sarah could use natural depressions, small bushes, and rocky outcroppings that wouldn't conceal a bigger person. She developed techniques for moving silently that her instructors had never seen before. During one particularly challenging exercise, candidates had to stalk to within 200 yards of an observation post without being detected by instructors using binoculars and spotting scopes. Many of the experienced soldiers were spotted and failed the exercise, forced to start over from the beginning. Sarah not only reached the target distance undetected, but managed to get within 150 yards before taking her shot. The mental pressure of sniper school proved to be as challenging as the physical demands. Candidates were subjected to sleep deprivation, stress testing, and scenarios designed to simulate the psychological challenges of combat. They had to maintain perfect shooting accuracy even when exhausted, hungry, and under extreme time pressure. Sarah discovered that her years of hunting with her father had prepared her for the mental aspects of sniping better than she had realized. The patience required to wait hours for the perfect shot, the mental discipline to control breathing and heart rate under pressure, and the ability to make split-second decisions had all been part of her training since childhood. As the weeks progressed, the number of candidates in Sarah's class steadily decreased. Some failed physical fitness tests, Others couldn't meet the marksmanship standards, and several dropped out voluntarily when the pressure became too intense. Sarah watched capable soldiers pack their bags and leave, knowing that she was being held to an even higher standard because of her unique position as the first woman in the program. The instructors seemed to be looking for any excuse to eliminate her from the course. They scrutinized her performance more closely than others, required her to repeat exercises that she had already passed, and subjected her to additional questioning about her techniques and decision-making processes. Rather than becoming discouraged, Sarah used the extra attention as motivation to exceed every standard by an even greater margin. During week 8 of the 10-week program, Sarah faced her most difficult challenge yet. The final field exercise required candidates to work alone for 72 hours, completing a series of reconnaissance and engagement missions while evading instructors who were actively hunting for them. Failure to complete any portion of the exercise meant immediate dismissal from the program. Sarah's small size and superior fieldcraft skills gave her significant advantages during the exercise. She was able to establish concealed positions that larger candidates couldn't use, and move through terrain that would have been impossible for someone with a bigger frame. Her shooting accuracy under field conditions exceeded even her range performance, as the realistic scenario seemed to enhance rather than hinder her natural abilities. By the final day of the exercise, only 12 candidates remained from the original 32. Sarah had not only survived every challenge but had achieved the highest overall scores in marksmanship, fieldcraft, and mission completion rates. The same instructors who had initially doubted her capabilities were now using her techniques as examples for other students. Master Sergeant Williams addressed the remaining candidates on the final morning of sniper school. He acknowledged that they had completed one of the military's most demanding training programs and had earned the right to be called snipers. When he announced the class rankings, Sarah Martinez was listed as the distinguished graduate, the top performer in every category measured during the 10-week course. The graduation ceremony was attended by senior military officials who had heard about the small woman who had not only completed sniper school, but had excelled beyond all expectations. As Sarah received her sniper badge and certificate, she thought about all the people who had told her she was too small for military service. She had proven that skill, determination, and heart mattered far more than physical size. 6 months after graduating from sniper school, Sarah Martinez found herself boarding a military transport plane bound for Afghanistan. The war was in its 15th year, and Taliban forces had adapted their tactics to counter traditional military operations. Special operations units were increasingly relying on precision marksmanship to eliminate high-value targets while minimizing civilian casualties and collateral damage. Sarah was assigned to work with Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, one of the Army's premier special operations units. The Rangers had requested a sniper to support their missions in the mountainous regions of eastern Afghanistan, where engagements often occurred at extended ranges that challenged conventional infantry weapons. When Sarah arrived at Forward Operating Base Chapman, her new unit's reaction was predictable. The Rangers were among the most physically imposing soldiers in the Army, averaging over 6 feet tall and 200 pounds. Sarah's arrival created immediate whispers and speculation about whether she could keep up with their demanding operational tempo. Captain Morrison, the company commander, was a veteran of 4 combat deployments who had seen every type of soldier imaginable. However, he admitted privately that he had never worked with a female sniper before. He reviewed Sarah's training records and test scores multiple times, trying to reconcile her impressive credentials with his concerns about how she would perform in actual combat conditions. The first few weeks at the base were frustrating for Sarah. While other soldiers were assigned to patrol duties and combat missions, she found herself relegated to base security and training duties. Some of the Rangers made it clear that they viewed her presence as an unnecessary risk that could compromise mission effectiveness. Staff Sergeant Jackson, a squad leader with 3 combat tours, was particularly vocal about his doubts. During a unit meeting, he questioned whether having a female soldier on patrol would create additional complications, and suggested that Sarah should be assigned to support roles rather than direct combat operations. His comments reflected the concerns of several other soldiers who weren't sure how to integrate her into their established team dynamics. Sarah's opportunity to prove herself came sooner than expected. Intelligence reports indicated that a Taliban commander responsible for several attacks on coalition forces was operating from a compound in a remote mountain village. The target was located in terrain that provided limited approach routes and required precision engagement from extreme distance to avoid civilian casualties. Captain Morrison decided to give Sarah a chance to demonstrate her capabilities. The mission would involve a small team infiltrating to within 800 yards of the target compound and eliminating the commander when he appeared. The approach would require moving through difficult mountain terrain at night, establishing a concealed position, and maintaining surveillance for up to 48 hours. Sarah was paired with Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, an experienced ranger with expertise in reconnaissance and forward observation. Rodriguez had initially been skeptical about working with the new sniper, but he was professional enough to focus on mission success rather than personal opinions. He would serve as Sarah's spotter, providing target identification and range calculations while she made the shots. The 2-day mission began with a helicopter insertion 10 miles from the target area. Sarah and Rodriguez had to navigate through rocky mountain terrain, carrying full combat loads while avoiding detection by local villagers and Taliban patrols. Sarah's physical conditioning from sniper school served her well during the demanding movement, and she kept pace with Rodriguez despite carrying the heavier sniper rifle system. Establishing their observation position required careful selection of terrain that provided both concealment and clear lines of sight to the target compound. Sarah identified a location among large rocks approximately 850 yards from the village that offered perfect concealment while allowing observation of the entire target area. The position was cramped and uncomfortable, but it provided exactly what they needed for the mission. For 36 hours, Sarah and Rodriguez maintained surveillance on the compound while waiting for their target to appear. The Taliban commander was cautious and rarely exposed himself during daylight hours. Sarah had to remain motionless for hours at a time, controlling her breathing and heart rate while staying alert for any sign of the target. The mental discipline required for extended surveillance was something Sarah had developed during countless hunting trips with her father. While Rodriguez struggled with the boredom and discomfort of remaining hidden in the cramped position, Sarah seemed to enter a meditative state that allowed her to maintain focus without fatigue. On the second day, intelligence reports indicated that the Taliban commander was planning to meet with subordinates at the compound during the afternoon. Sarah and Rodriguez prepared their equipment and confirmed their target identification procedures. The shot, if it presented itself, would be at a distance that challenged even the most experienced snipers. At 14:30 hours, several men emerged from the main building of the compound. Rodriguez used his spotting scope to identify individuals while Sarah tracked them through her rifle scope. After several minutes of observation, they positively identified their target based on intelligence photographs and distinctive clothing. The target moved to an open area where he was clearly visible, but surrounded by other individuals. Sarah would need to make a precision shot that eliminated the commander without injuring anyone else nearby. The distance was 863 yards, and a slight crosswind required careful calculation to ensure bullet placement. Sarah controlled her breathing and settled into her shooting position. She calculated the wind effects and bullet drop for the extended range, made her scope adjustments, and waited for the perfect moment when the target was isolated from others. When the opportunity presented itself, she squeezed the trigger with the same smooth motion she had practiced thousands of times. The bullet flew for just over 1 second before striking the target center mass. The Taliban commander dropped immediately while the other individuals scattered for cover, unaware of where the shot had originated. Sarah and Rodriguez observed the target area for several minutes to confirm the kill before beginning their extraction from the area. The mission was considered a complete success by military standards. A high-value target had been eliminated with no civilian casualties and no compromise to friendly forces. Sarah had demonstrated that she could perform effectively in combat conditions while working as part of a team with an experienced partner. When Sarah and Rodriguez returned to the forward operating base, word of the successful mission had already spread throughout the unit. Captain Morrison debriefed them thoroughly and was impressed by both Sarah's shooting performance and her professional conduct during the extended surveillance operation. More importantly, Rodriguez provided enthusiastic recommendations about Sarah's capabilities and reliability. The successful mission marked a turning point in how Sarah was perceived by her unit. The same Rangers who had initially questioned her presence began requesting her for their upcoming operations. Staff Sergeant Jackson, who had been among her strongest critics, approached her privately to acknowledge that his previous concerns had been unfounded. Over the following months, Sarah participated in dozens of combat missions throughout eastern Afghanistan. She developed a reputation for making difficult shots under challenging conditions, while maintaining the tactical discipline and teamwork that special operations required. Her small stature continued to provide advantages in concealment and movement, while her marksmanship skills exceeded even the high expectations of her Ranger colleagues. Sarah's success in combat began attracting attention from higher military leadership. Special operations commanders were beginning to recognize that female soldiers could contribute to mission success in ways that traditional thinking had not considered. Sarah represented a new approach to warfare that emphasized precision and skill over physical size and conventional tactics. As her deployment progressed, Sarah Martinez was no longer seen as an experimental addition to the unit. She had become an integral part of Bravo Company's operational capability, trusted by her teammates and respected by her commanders. The girl who had been told she was too small for military service had proven herself in the ultimate test of combat operations. 3 months into her deployment, Sarah Martinez had established herself as one of the most effective snipers operating in eastern Afghanistan. Her kill count had reached double digits, and she had participated in over 20 successful missions without a single failure or compromise. However, the mission that would define her military career was about to begin with an emergency briefing at 0200 hours. Captain Morrison gathered his available personnel in the operations center, where intelligence officers were displaying satellite imagery and reconnaissance photos on multiple screens. The situation was critical. A Navy SEAL team conducting a high-priority raid had been ambushed and pinned down in a remote valley approximately 40 miles from their base. The SEALs were trapped in a compound surrounded by heavily armed Taliban fighters who had superior numbers and advantageous positions. The SEAL team, call sign Neptune 6, consisted of 8 operators who had been attempting to capture a high-value target when they walked into a carefully planned ambush. Taliban forces had allowed them to enter the compound before surrounding them with fighters positioned on surrounding ridgelines and buildings. The SEALs were facing overwhelming odds and running low on ammunition. Rescue helicopter attempts had been driven off by heavy machine gun fire from elevated positions that conventional air support couldn't effectively target without risking the lives of the trapped SEALs. The enemy fighters were using heavy weapons, including rocket-propelled grenades and coordinated small arms fire, to prevent any rescue attempts. Intelligence indicated that the Taliban had positioned their most experienced fighters in concealed positions on 3 different ridgelines overlooking the compound. These fighters were armed with heavy machine guns and sniper rifles that gave them complete control over the valley floor. Any rescue force would have to neutralize these positions before the SEALs could be extracted. Captain Morrison explained that conventional assault tactics wouldn't work in this situation. The terrain favored the defenders, and direct assault would likely result in heavy casualties among both rescue forces and the trapped SEALs. What they needed was precision marksmanship from extreme distances to eliminate the key enemy positions one by one. Sarah immediately recognized that this mission would push her capabilities to their absolute limits. The distances involved would exceed anything she had attempted in combat, with shots potentially extending beyond 1,200 yards in mountainous terrain, with unpredictable wind conditions. The pressure would be enormous, knowing that 8 American lives depended on her accuracy. The rescue plan was complex and dangerous. Sarah would be inserted with a small support team to a position approximately 1,500 yards from the trapped SEALs. From there, she would have to identify and eliminate the Taliban fighters controlling the high ground while avoiding detection by other enemy forces in the area. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez would again serve as Sarah's spotter, while Staff Sergeant Jackson would lead a small security element to protect their position. The team would have to move on foot through enemy territory at night, establish a firing position before dawn, and then engage targets throughout the daylight hours while remaining concealed from enemy observation. Time was critical, because intelligence reports suggested that the Taliban was preparing to overrun the SEAL position with a coordinated assault planned for the following evening. Sarah's team had less than 18 hours to reach their position, identify targets, and begin eliminating the enemy fighters who were preventing rescue operations. The helicopter insertion was conducted in complete darkness 3 miles from Sarah's intended firing position. The team had to navigate through rough mountain terrain while carrying full combat loads and specialized equipment. Sarah's rifle system alone weighed over 20 pounds, and she also carried additional ammunition and survival gear for extended operations. Moving through the mountains in darkness required extreme caution to avoid detection, while still making adequate progress toward their objective. Sarah's experience in Montana wilderness proved valuable, as she navigated rocky terrain and steep slopes that challenged even the experienced rangers accompanying her. The team reached their intended position just as dawn was breaking over the valley. Sarah immediately began studying the terrain around the trapped SEAL position, using her spotting scope to identify the enemy fighting positions that intelligence had located. The complexity of the tactical situation was immediately apparent. Taliban fighters had established 3 main positions on ridgelines that provided overlapping fields of fire covering the entire valley floor. Each position appeared to contain multiple fighters with heavy weapons, and they had constructed fortified positions that provided excellent protection from return fire. The distances ranged from 950 yards to over 1,300 yards, with challenging elevation differences and wind conditions. Sarah spent 2 hours conducting detailed observation of each enemy position, noting the number of fighters, their weapon systems, and their movement patterns. She identified the key personnel in each position, who appeared to be leaders or heavy weapons operators. These individuals would be her priority targets. The first shot of the day came at 08:47 hours, when Sarah engaged a Taliban fighter operating a heavy machine gun from the nearest ridgeline position. The distance was 967 yards with a slight crosswind and significant elevation difference. Sarah made her calculations, controlled her breathing, and squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck the target center mass, immediately eliminating the machine gunner and creating confusion among the other fighters in that position. However, Sarah's shot had also revealed her general location to the enemy, and return fire began impacting the rocks around her position within seconds. Over the next 6 hours, Sarah systematically engaged targets across all 3 enemy positions. Each shot required careful calculation of distance, wind conditions, and bullet trajectory. The pressure was enormous because missed shots not only wasted precious ammunition, but also provided the enemy with information about her location. Sarah's accuracy under these extreme conditions was extraordinary. She eliminated 14 Taliban fighters with 18 shots, a success rate that amazed even her experienced spotter. Each successful engagement reduced the enemy's ability to prevent rescue operations, while also degrading their morale and command structure. The psychological impact of Sarah's precision shooting began affecting the entire enemy force. Taliban fighters became reluctant to expose themselves, knowing that an unseen sniper was systematically eliminating their comrades from impossible distances. Their rate of fire decreased significantly as they focused more on finding cover than engaging targets. By mid-afternoon, Sarah had reduced the enemy's combat effectiveness enough that rescue helicopters could approach the valley. However, one final enemy position continued to threaten the extraction with accurate machine gun fire. This target was located over 200 yards away at a difficult angle that required Sarah to account for multiple environmental factors. The shot that would later become legendary in special operations circles was taken at 1,247 yards against a Taliban fighter who was directing fire against incoming rescue helicopters. Sarah had to calculate for extreme distance, crosswind, elevation difference, and the movement of her target, who was occasionally exposed while operating his weapon. When Sarah took the shot, everyone in her position held their breath. The bullet traveled for over 2 seconds before striking the enemy fighter precisely where Sarah had aimed. The machine gun fire that had been threatening the rescue helicopters stopped immediately. With the final enemy position neutralized, rescue helicopters were able to reach the trapped SEAL team without taking effective fire. Sarah watched through her scope as the 8 Navy SEALs were loaded onto helicopters and lifted to safety. The mission that had seemed impossible just hours earlier had been completed successfully through precision marksmanship and tactical patience. The extraction of Sarah's team was conducted under cover of darkness that evening. As they prepared to leave their position, Rodriguez looked at Sarah with obvious admiration. In his 12 years of military service, he had never witnessed shooting of such accuracy under such extreme pressure. Sarah had not only saved 8 American lives, but had demonstrated capabilities that exceeded anything he had thought possible. The helicopter ride back to base was quiet, with each team member processing what they had just witnessed. Sarah felt exhausted but satisfied, knowing that her years of training and natural abilities had been used to achieve something truly meaningful. She had proven that size and gender were irrelevant when it came to saving lives and completing critical missions. When they landed at the forward operating base, Word of the successful rescue had already spread throughout the military community in Afghanistan. The SEAL team commander had submitted a detailed report describing how Sarah's precision shooting had made their rescue possible. Within hours, senior military leadership was requesting briefings about the female sniper who had accomplished what many considered impossible. The mission report documented Sarah's 18 successful engagements at distances ranging from 967 to 1,247 yards under challenging field conditions. Military analysts noted that her accuracy rate exceeded anything previously recorded. The rescue mission that saved Neptune 6 had transformed Sarah Martinez from a competent sniper into a military legend. Within weeks of the operation, her story was being discussed in Pentagon briefing rooms and Special Operations Command Centers across multiple military branches. The impossible shots she had made under extreme pressure had forced military leadership to reconsider their assumptions about combat effectiveness and soldier capabilities. Sarah's unit commander, Captain Morrison, received a call from Colonel Anderson, the Special Operations Commander for the entire region. The colonel wanted to meet personally with Sarah to discuss her techniques and potential reassignment to more specialized units that could better utilize her exceptional abilities. The meeting was scheduled for the following week at the regional headquarters. However, before Sarah could meet with Colonel Anderson, another crisis emerged that would test her skills in an entirely different way. Intelligence reports indicated that a group of American civilians, including aid workers and journalists, had been kidnapped by Taliban forces and were being held in a remote mountain compound. The hostages were in immediate danger, and rescue operations needed to be conducted within 48 hours. The hostage rescue mission presented unique challenges that differed significantly from Sarah's previous combat operations. The presence of civilian hostages meant that any use of force had to be precisely controlled to avoid harm to innocent people. Additionally, the kidnappers were using the hostages as human shields, making direct assault extremely risky. Sarah was called into an emergency planning session where military leaders and intelligence officers were developing rescue options. The compound holding the hostages was located in terrain that provided limited approach routes and was heavily defended by experienced Taliban fighters. Conventional rescue tactics would likely result in casualties among both rescuers and hostages. The rescue plan that emerged required Sarah to provide precision overwatch, while Special Operations Forces approached the compound. Her role would be to eliminate specific threats that could harm hostages, while avoiding any shots that might endanger the civilians. The margins for error were essentially zero, requiring accuracy and judgment that exceeded even her previous accomplishments. Colonel Martinez, who had arrived to observe the planning process, initially expressed concerns about using a sniper in such a delicate situation. The presence of hostages created complications that made precision shooting extremely risky, and any mistakes could have devastating consequences. However, other senior officers argued that Sarah's proven accuracy and judgment made her the best available option. Sarah studied the intelligence materials and compound layout for hours, identifying potential shooting positions and calculating angles that would allow engagement of hostile forces without endangering civilians. The complexity of the tactical problem was enormous, requiring her to consider not just accuracy, but also timing, target identification, and coordination with ground forces. The mission briefing revealed that 6 American civilians were being held in different locations throughout the compound. Taliban guards were positioned to watch both the hostages and potential approach routes, making coordinated rescue extremely challenging. Sarah would need to eliminate specific guards at precisely timed moments to create opportunities for rescue teams. Sarah's insertion was conducted at night using a helicopter that deposited her team on a mountain ridge overlooking the target compound. The distance to the buildings below was approximately 800 yards, providing clear lines of sight while maintaining sufficient standoff distance for safety. Sarah established her firing position among rocks that provided both concealment and stability for extended shooting. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez again served as Sarah's spotter, while the rescue operation was coordinated by a joint team of Army Rangers and Navy SEALs. Radio communications linked all elements of the operation, allowing real-time coordination between Sarah's overwatch position and the ground assault teams approaching the compound. The operation began at dawn, when rescue teams initiated their approach to the compound perimeter. Sarah's first target was a guard positioned on a rooftop, who had clear sight lines to the main approach route. The shot had to be taken precisely as the assault team reached a specific checkpoint, ensuring that the guard's elimination would not alert other defenders prematurely. Sarah's shot eliminated the rooftop guard exactly on schedule, allowing the assault team to advance undetected. However, moments later, other guards became suspicious when their colleague failed to respond to radio calls. The tactical situation began evolving rapidly as Taliban fighters moved to investigate the guard's position. Over the next 30 minutes, Sarah engaged 8 different targets with precision shots that supported the advancing rescue teams. Each engagement required split-second decisions about target identification and shot timing. Sarah had to constantly evaluate whether potential targets posed immediate threats to hostages or rescue teams, while avoiding any shots that could endanger civilians. The most challenging moment came when Taliban fighters began using hostages as human shields, positioning American civilians directly in front of themselves while firing at approaching rescue teams. Sarah found herself with clear shots at the kidnappers, but couldn't engage without risking harm to the hostages they were using for protection. Sarah made a tactical decision that demonstrated both her marksmanship skills and her judgment under pressure. Instead of engaging the kidnappers directly, she began placing precision shots just inches from their positions, creating psychological pressure while demonstrating her capability without endangering civilians. The near-miss shots convinced several kidnappers to abandon their positions and seek better cover. The precision harassment shooting that Sarah employed had never been attempted in similar tactical situations. By placing bullets within inches of enemy fighters without hitting them, she created fear and confusion that disrupted their defensive coordination. Several Taliban fighters abandoned advantageous positions because they believed they were about to be killed by an unseen sniper. Rescue teams were able to reach the hostages when the psychological pressure from Sarah's shooting caused defensive coordination to break down. 6 American civilians were successfully extracted from the compound with no injuries, while Taliban resistance collapsed under the combined pressure of ground assault and precision sniper harassment. The hostage rescue operation was considered a complete success by all measures. American civilians had been saved without casualties. Enemy resistance had been overcome through minimal use of force, and tactical objectives had been achieved through innovative techniques. Sarah's contribution had been critical to mission success. Colonel Anderson arrived at Sarah's base 2 days after the hostage rescue to conduct his scheduled meeting. However, the conversation had changed significantly based on her recent performance. Instead of discussing potential reassignments, the colonel wanted to understand how Sarah's techniques could be incorporated into training programs for other snipers. During their meeting, Colonel Anderson acknowledged that Sarah had demonstrated capabilities that exceeded traditional sniper employment concepts. Her precision harassment technique and ability to provide psychological pressure without lethal force represented innovations that could revolutionize hostage rescue operations. Military leadership wanted to study and replicate her methods. Sarah's success in 2 consecutive high-profile operations had established her as more than just an exceptional sniper. She had become a tactical innovator, whose techniques were being analyzed by military strategists and incorporated into operational planning. Her small stature and unique background had contributed to developing new approaches to complex combat problems. The recognition Sarah received included recommendations for significant military decorations and invitations to address military leadership conferences about her experiences. However, she remained focused on her primary mission of supporting her unit and protecting American lives. The attention was appreciated but secondary to her responsibilities as a soldier. As Sarah's deployment in Afghanistan continued, her reputation spread beyond military circles. News media began reporting stories about the female sniper, whose innovative techniques had saved American lives in impossible situations. Sarah became a symbol of military excellence and proof that talent and determination could overcome any obstacles or prejudices. The transformation from doubted recruit to military legend was complete. But Sarah Martinez knew that her most important mission was yet to come. The techniques she had developed and the barriers she had broken were creating opportunities for other women to serve in combat roles previously closed to them. Her legacy would extend far beyond her own accomplishments to include the careers and contributions of those who would follow in her footsteps. Sarah Martinez returned from her deployment in Afghanistan as one of the most decorated snipers in modern military history. Her actions had saved dozens of American lives, revolutionized tactical approaches to precision shooting, and permanently changed military policies regarding women in combat roles. However, the transition from combat operations to life back home presented new challenges that tested her in unexpected ways. The awards ceremony at the Pentagon was attended by senior military leadership from all service branches, including generals and admirals who had followed Sarah's career with great interest. She received the Silver Star for gallantry in action during the SEAL rescue operation, making her one of the few women to receive such a high decoration for direct combat actions. The citation specifically mentioned her extraordinary heroism under enemy fire and exceptional marksmanship that saved the lives of 8 American servicemen. In addition to the Silver Star, Sarah received the Bronze Star Medal with Valor Device for the hostage rescue operation, the Army Commendation Medal with Valor Device for multiple combat actions, and several other decorations recognizing her exceptional service. The ceremony was covered by national news media, making Sarah's story known to millions of Americans who had never heard of her before. The attention that followed Sarah's recognition was both overwhelming and humbling. She received thousands of letters from young women across the country who had been inspired by her story to pursue military careers or other fields previously dominated by men. Sarah realized that her actions had created responsibilities that extended far beyond her own military service. Military leadership offered Sarah numerous opportunities for advanced assignments and specialized training programs. She was invited to attend the Army's most prestigious leadership schools, offered positions with elite special operations units, and given opportunities to help develop new sniper training curricula. Each opportunity represented recognition of her exceptional capabilities and potential for continued contributions. However, Sarah chose a different path that surprised many of her military colleagues. She requested assignment to the Army Sniper School as an instructor, where she could train the next generation of military marksmen and share the techniques she had developed during combat operations. Her goal was to ensure that other soldiers could benefit from the lessons she had learned through trial and error in life-threatening situations. Sarah's assignment to the Sniper School represented a significant change in military training philosophy. For the first time, a female instructor would be training male soldiers in one of the military's most demanding specialties. Her presence challenged traditional assumptions about instruction and leadership, while providing students with insights that could only come from actual combat experience. The first class of students assigned to Sarah included several experienced snipers seeking advanced training, and numerous new candidates beginning their sniper careers. Many of them had heard stories about her combat accomplishments, creating both expectations and skepticism about what they would learn from someone who looked nothing like their mental image of a military instructor. Sarah's teaching methods incorporated lessons learned from her unique background and combat experiences. She emphasized the importance of patience, mental discipline, and innovative thinking in addition to traditional marksmanship skills. Her students learned techniques for extreme distance shooting, precision harassment, and psychological warfare that had never been formally taught in military schools. The precision harassment technique that Sarah had developed during the hostage rescue operation became a key component of her curriculum. Students learned how to use near-miss shots to create psychological pressure and disrupt enemy coordination without causing unnecessary casualties. This approach represented a significant evolution in sniper employment that balanced effectiveness with humanitarian considerations. Sarah's influence extended beyond the classroom as she became involved in developing new military policies regarding women in combat roles. Her documented performance provided concrete evidence that gender was irrelevant to combat effectiveness when proper training and opportunities were provided. Military leadership consulted with her regularly about policy changes and program development. The policy changes that resulted from Sarah's service opened combat positions to women throughout the military. Positions that had been closed to female soldiers for decades became available based on individual qualifications rather than gender restrictions. Sarah's combat record had provided the proof necessary to overcome institutional resistance to these changes. Young women began arriving at military training facilities in unprecedented numbers, many of them specifically citing Sarah's example as their inspiration for military service. The recruitment numbers for combat specialties among female soldiers increased dramatically as word spread about opportunities previously unavailable to them. Sarah established a mentorship program for female soldiers pursuing sniper training and other combat specialties. She provided guidance, support, and practical advice to help them navigate the challenges of entering male-dominated fields. Her mentorship extended beyond technical skills to include leadership development and career planning. The program's success was measured not just in graduation rates but in the long-term career success of its participants. Many of Sarah's mentees went on to achieve significant military accomplishments of their own, becoming leaders in their respective fields and continuing the cycle of breaking down barriers for future generations. 5 years after her return from Afghanistan, Sarah had trained over 200 military snipers, including both male and female students from all service branches. Her techniques were being used by special operations units worldwide, and her innovations had been incorporated into training programs throughout the military. The small girl from Montana had become one of the most influential military instructors of her generation. Sarah's story continued to inspire people beyond military circles. She spoke at universities, leadership conferences, and youth organizations about overcoming obstacles and pursuing goals, despite skepticism from others. Her message resonated with audiences who faced their own challenges related to size, gender, background, or other factors that might limit their opportunities. The legacy that Sarah Martinez created extended far beyond her individual accomplishments. She had proven that talent, determination, and courage were more important than physical characteristics or traditional expectations. Her service had opened doors for countless other women and demonstrated that military effectiveness depended on skill and dedication rather than conventional assumptions. As Sarah looked back on her journey from small-town hunter to military legend, she felt proud of both her combat accomplishments and her contributions to changing military culture. The girl who had been told she was too small had not only saved lives but had created opportunities for others to serve their country in ways previously denied to them. The transformation was complete, but Sarah's work continued. Every student she trained, every barrier she helped break down, and every person she inspired represented a continuation of the legacy that had begun with a determined teenager who refused to accept limitations placed on her by others. Sarah Martinez had proven that there were no limits to what could be accomplished when talent met opportunity and determination overcame doubt. Her story became a testament to the power of perseverance and the importance of judging people by their capabilities rather than their appearance. The female sniper who had saved the SEALs had become something even more significant, a symbol of what was possible when society recognized and nurtured talent regardless of traditional expectations or prejudices.